Imagine going to work every day, doing your job, providing for your family, and years later discovering that the very place you trusted slowly exposed you to a deadly substance. A substance that can stay hidden in your body for decades before showing its damage. And when victims finally discovered the truth, many realized something shocking. Companies often knew the risks all along. That's why, in the United States, asbestos lawsuits have resulted in billions of dollars in compensation, and the lawyers who handle these cases are some of the most specialized attorneys in the country. Now here's the question that many people don't ask soon enough. If someone is diagnosed with an asbestos-related disease, how do they actually get justice? To understand that, we need to talk about asbestos lawyers in the United States, what they really do, and why their role can make the difference between a denied claim and a life-changing settlement. First, let's quickly understand the problem. For decades, asbestos was widely used in construction, shipbuilding, insulation, factories, automotive parts, and even household products. It was cheap, strong, and resistant to heat. From a business perspective, it seemed perfect. But medically, it was devastating. When asbestos fibers are inhaled, they can lodge deep in the lungs. Over time, those fibers can cause serious diseases like mesothelioma, lung cancer, and asbestosis. What makes this especially tragic is the latency period. Symptoms often appear 20 to 50 years after exposure. That means someone who worked in a shipyard in the 1980s might only receive a diagnosis today. And when that diagnosis happens, victims often face enormous medical bills, lost income, and emotional stress for themselves and their families. This is where asbestos lawyers come in. An asbestos lawyer is a specialized attorney who focuses on representing people harmed by asbestos exposure, but their job is far more complex than simply filing paperwork. These lawyers investigate where the exposure happened, identify the companies responsible, gather medical evidence, locate historical work records, and build a legal case that proves liability. And sometimes that investigation uncovers something disturbing, internal documents showing that companies were aware of asbestos dangers but continued using it anyway. Because of this history, courts across the United States have awarded significant compensation to asbestos victims, sometimes reaching hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, depending on the circumstances. But here's something most people don't realize. Winning an asbestos case isn't just about proving someone was sick, it's about proving where and how the exposure happened decades earlier. Imagine trying to remember every job site you worked at 30 years ago, every product you handled, every building you entered. That's incredibly difficult for an individual. But experienced asbestos law firms often maintain massive databases of job sites, manufacturers, and asbestos-containing products. These records help lawyers connect the dots between a patient's diagnosis and the companies responsible. Let's say someone worked in construction in the 1970s. Their lawyer might identify insulation materials, pipe coatings, or sealing products used at that site that contained asbestos. Those details become the foundation of the legal case. Now, another interesting part of asbestos law in the United States involves asbestos trust funds. Over the years, many companies that produced asbestos products filed for bankruptcy due to the enormous number of lawsuits against them. But courts required those companies to establish trust funds specifically to compensate victims. Today, asbestos trust funds collectively hold billions of dollars set aside for victims and their families. A skilled asbestos lawyer knows how to file claims with these trust funds while also pursuing lawsuits against other responsible companies that may still be operating. This dual approach can significantly increase the compensation available to victims. But timing matters more than most people realize. Each U.S. state has something called a statute of limitations, which is a legal deadline for filing a claim after a diagnosis. In many states, victims have 1 to 3 years to file a lawsuit after being diagnosed with an asbestos-related illness. If that deadline passes, victims may lose the ability to pursue compensation entirely. That's why many legal experts emphasize contacting an experienced asbestos lawyer as soon as possible after diagnosis. Now, let's talk about how asbestos lawyers actually get paid, because this is another area people often misunderstand. Most asbestos attorneys work on a contingency fee basis. That means the client typically pays no upfront legal fees. Instead, the lawyer receives a percentage of the compensation only if the case is successful. This structure allows victims to pursue legal action even if they cannot afford expensive legal costs. Another important factor is experience. Asbestos litigation is extremely specialized. The lawyers who handle these cases successfully often have decades of experience, access to medical experts, industrial safety specialists, and investigators who reconstruct exposure histories. They also understand the strategies used by large corporations and insurance companies defending these cases. Without experienced legal representation, it can be very difficult to navigate that process alone. Now, you might be wondering, how large can asbestos settlements actually be? The answer varies widely depending on factors like severity of the illness, the level of exposure, medical expenses, lost income, and the number of companies responsible. Some cases result in settlements of hundreds of thousands of dollars, while others involving severe diagnoses like mesothelioma reach seven-figure compensation. But it's important to remember that every case is unique and outcomes depend on the specific facts involved. Beyond financial compensation, many victims say their lawsuits are also about something deeper: accountability. For decades, many workers were never warned about asbestos exposure risks. Some were never given protective equipment. Others were exposed indirectly through contaminated workplaces. Legal action allows families to seek answers and ensure corporations are held responsible for the harm caused. And this accountability has had broader effects. Stronger workplace regulations, safety standards, and awareness around hazardous materials have all evolved partly because of these legal battles. So, if you or someone you know has been diagnosed with an asbestos-related illness, understanding your legal options is incredibly important. Speaking with a qualified asbestos lawyer can help determine whether compensation may be available through lawsuits, trust fund claims, or other legal avenues. And the earlier that process begins, the more information lawyers can gather to build a strong case. Because in many situations, the evidence needed to prove exposure becomes harder to obtain as time passes. Records disappear, witnesses move away, memories fade, but experienced attorneys know how to reconstruct these cases using historical product records, employment databases, and expert testimony. At the end of the day, asbestos litigation isn't just about the law. It's about workers, families, and individuals who trusted that their workplace was safe. And when that trust was broken, the legal system provides a path, sometimes the only path, towards justice and financial support. So here's the takeaway. Asbestos exposure remains one of the most significant occupational health issues in modern history. And while nothing can undo the damage caused by these diseases,